The Edgar Cayce Guide to Self-Healing. By Patrick J. Berkery. 6. The Human Mind and Self-Healing. We are going to touch the most important aspect of Cayce's theories on self-healing, and that is the role of the mind. What is mind and how is it used to bring about the state of balance we call health? We have been told repeatedly that the mind influences the well-being of the body. To what extent do positive or negative thoughts affect physical health? Should, then, the entity desire robust, strong, healthy self, think health, bring those conditions to self? Should entity weaken within self, and feel that the physical is below the normal, and is oppressed by same brings that suggestion to the whole condition acting within self. In the spiritual attitude towards same, as the entity thinketh within self, so be the entity, and as the spirit moves to bring about that physical, that mental attitude towards self, so will this be brought. In the mental there is seen much development in the consciousness of the various phases of the conscious forces, as may be manifest in, and through the individual, and as these are made to give off their forces in various manifestations in mental conditions, so may physical, spiritual and mental round into that condition wherein the entity stands for that dynamic force, as is necessary for the accomplishment of those goals to which the mental attains in this material plane. For those physical defects as give distress at times to the body, bring self to do that physical manipulation for feet, hands, limbs, neck, face, with that continual suggestion to self of the inflowing power of the divine to make all paths straight. A physical demonstration may be seen in self. In applying same to the spiritual, empty self of all thought concerning any and every material condition, and let the oneness of the spirit flow in. For Cayce, the mind is the active principle that controls and dictates man from within. Cayce sees the mind as an active force in an animate object, the spark or will, that which makes one individual when we reach the earth plane. It is the mind which reasons the impressions from the senses, as they manifest before the individual. Just as the psychic force is a manifestation of the soul and spirit, so too, the mind is a manifestation of the physical. For Cayce, the mind is a vital power for healing, yet at the same time, it is not a simple, easy-to-visualize muscle. You cannot picture the mind in a physical dimension, yet you cannot discount its existence. Cayce respected the mind and through all of his readings runs the basic motif that mind is the builder. Cayce defined the mind as a power composed of many parts. We will see in further readings that he placed a great emphasis on the conscious mind, but was especially attracted towards the powers of the subconscious and unconscious minds. The conscious mind was dependent upon the five senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch and smell. The five senses provided the conscious mind with the material needed to achieve conscious reasoning. In describing the conscious and unconscious mind, Cayce reveals his own insights. Cayce teaches that the unconscious mind is divided into the subconscious and the superconscious minds. It is the role of the subconscious mind to store the messages received from the conscious mind. Whatever the five senses collate, the subconscious mind stores. The subconscious mind exercises a massive influence over the state of health of the physical body. The subconscious is the storehouse not only of our sense impressions, but also of all our previous lives. This memory, however, is not available to the person's own conscious mind, this despite the fact that one may read his own past memories if he knows how to tune in on them, such as through deep self-hypnosis. The superconscious mind is devoted entirely to the soul mind. This portion or division of the mind has within it the memory of God's presence. It is man's remaining tie, and the communication link with his original spiritual consciousness. The mind is the blueprint for the whole structure of our being. That is why Cayce placed so much emphasis on it. Keep the heart singing. Keep the mind clear. Keep the face toward the light. The shadows then are behind. What a man thinks continually, he becomes. What a man holds as precious in his heart and mind, he makes a vital substance of the pulsation of his heart and through his blood cells, and he builds, in his own physical being, that which his spirit and soul must need, feeds upon, and that by which it will be possessed when it passes into the realm where the experiences it has gained here in the physical plane must be put to good use. The mind is central to all that we are and do. For, as the mind is the builder, or, as a man thinketh so is he, so does that mind, that body, that soul, expand to meet the needs of same. Cayce constantly warned of the negative influence the mind could exert on our physical health. There is nothing outside of self half so fearful as that may be builded or brewed within self's own mental and material being. To lose self to such fears is to keep self busy in contemplation of the good that may be accomplished, in loving appreciation, loving thought, of how there may be mitted to someone those things that have been and are enjoyed by self, in little material things, greater mental things, and the glorious spiritual attributes of every soul. Well, that the correct attitudes and the general mental forces be kept in accord with that which is constructive toward all relationships, that there may be kept a more even balance. 4. To work in the mental attitudes as to produce poisons as fast as they may be eliminated, becomes detrimental, to be sure. That as the mind dwells upon is builded. We cannot reject the forces of the mind. It exists. The people of ancient Atlantis rejected the power of the mind. They did so by attempting to use it selfishly. And what happened? Destruction. For the abuse of the mind can bring about destruction of self and of one's loved ones. We all have the power of the mind within us. It is God-given and therefore, it comes with a distinct responsibility that it be used for its purposes of achieving balance. What Cayce demands is that we train ourselves and discipline ourselves so that this power may be used rightly. From the readings, it is obvious that Cayce recoiled at the idea of abusing the power of the mind, especially by forcing others to do our will. Cayce rejected all forms of force, as he taught that every person was free. That did not stop him from attempting to influence others for good through his teachings and readings. He gave everyone the privilege of deciding the truth for the self. God calls upon every man everywhere to look, to heed and to understand, and that is why he created the mind. Cayce was asked if the power of the mind could change physical conditions. For, as should be gained by all, desire brought the earth and the heavens into being from an all-wise creator. So man, by his heritage to that creation, may bring through desire, whether of earthly, heavenly, spiritually, those things that they, the individual, the entity, must meet, by creating, making, being that desire. Hence, as we find, all the various phases of changes as may be wrought in man's or woman's activities, for by taking thought no man may add 1 cubit, nor can, by taking thought, the head be changed 1 whit, yet desire, and the fathering and mothering of desire, may change a whole universe. For, from the desires of the heart do the activities of the brain, of the physical being, shape that as would be created by same. That ye think, that ye devour as it were, that spirit of same ye become. At times we find these conditions get on the nerves of the body, as it were, and the body ceases to care, to put up the resistance, feeling as if there is no use. This should be dismissed, for the body should acquire and gain, and set before self, that all building and replenishing for a physical body is from within, and must be constructed by the mind of the entity, for mind is the builder, for each cell in the atomic force of the body is as a world of its own, and each one, each cell, being in perfect unison, may build to that necessary to reconstruct the forces of the body in all its needs. Cayce gives a vital role to the mind. According to Cayce, the earth is simply the spiritual laboratory wherein man has been given by the Creator the unique opportunity, or putting everything together, achieving balance mentally, spiritually and physically, all within the framework of one's spiritual needs, ideals and purposes. What does Cayce mean by calling the mind the builder? What he is saying is that which the mind has built, or experienced in material consciousness is impressed, for better or worse, with what we refer to as attitudes and emotions, positive or negative, toward those prior experiences. Cayce is telling us that our attitudes and prejudices, tastes, inclinations, etc., have a basis in our past. So we are continually responding to situations, geographic locations and people, real or imagined, that we have a memory of from past experiences, either in this life or from others. Mind is the builder means, as we sow, so shall we reap. The man who made his neighbor fear and distrust him will someday live to know fear and distrust within himself. He meets self. On the other hand, if he sows kindness, builds love and understanding, all this too will one day return to the builder in like manner. For mind is the builder, and that which we think upon may become crimes or miracles. For thoughts are things, and as their currents run through the environs of an entity's experience, these become barriers or stepping stones, dependent upon the manner in which these are laid, as it were. For as the mental dwells upon these thoughts, so does it give strength, power to things that do not appear. And thus does indeed there become that as is so oft given, that faith is the evidence of things not seen. Know that each thought, each act, desire, is that being builded, one can see how, where, what way and manner each, in their sojourns in the spheres, make for this entering in. As in earth, we have that position in which matter takes all its various forms of presentation of a given energy, or force, as radiated from the various effects of this solar aspect, and take on bodily form, occupying a position of, as it were, 3 in 1, or all force in this sphere taking on that appearance of that known as threefold, or the aspects of a threefold nature. To what extent is someone permanently influenced by former unhappy experiences? Cayce was not a fatalist, but sincerely believed that although the mind is the builder, it is not a jailer. A person can do anything about his past, and not just wallow in it. To what extent am I permanently influenced by former unhappy experiences? As these are allowed to become a part of the warp and woof of the thinking. Remember, the mind is the builder. They take hold, but if these are lost in him and his promises, not only the physical disturbance of the neurosis may be eliminated, but the influences of unhappy experiences may become as nothing. If you are tired, Cayce says, even this temporary state can be alleviated by the proper use of the mind. What should be done for tiredness, irritability? Change the way of thinking, and eliminate the poisons. The path to mental health and the best safeguard of the mind is service, precisely what self-healing achieves. Keep the eye single to a service for spiritual understanding, and a mental aberration, or a mental disturbance may not touch thee. If our thoughts are ceaselessly shaping and molding the actual physical content of our bodies, do we find it hard to believe that a less physical, less tangible kind of matter can be created by thought? Cayce taught that all building, developing, growth, must come from the internal being, engineered by the mind, for each cell in the atomic forces of the body is as a world of its own, and each cell being in perfect unison will build what is necessary to reconstruct the physical and spiritual forces of the body. That is what healing is all about. Spirit, then, is in all matter, and it is electrical in function, regardless of what physical form it assumes. Spirit is subject of the divine will, and through the mind, it is subject to man's will. Cayce believed that man has through his mind the power to truly be Lord of all creation, and what is more, he is the only survivor of this creation. God does not want man to perish, he does not will the loss of any soul. But because man is sometimes rebellious and selfish, he often hearkens to that which would separate him from his Maker. Cayce equates mind with the creative force, or what is known as the first cause, or again, that which we conceive of as God. Not that Cayce denies the distinction between man and God. Rather he sees similarities which, after all, isn't so strange, considering that God created man in his own image and likeness. The readings state that as creatures of the divine, We have received a mind as an attribute of our individual soul, and it is on this basis that we are co-creators with God. However, being a co-creator with God has its responsibilities, for as Cayce taught, we have a birthright of the soul, free will, which allows us to err or stray from the path of divine law or universal law. Despite what we may do with our gift of the mind, even though we rebel against God, He does receive us back, for it is karma that forces us to repentance. This is so because it has always been the will of God that man return to Him. Cayce tells us, then, that we should imagine the mind as a great cosmic loom spinning in time, with will, as the weaver, so we can look at our individually woven swatches of fabric, soul records, past and present, and we will see amidst them some areas of excellent cloth, well woven, orderly, beautifully colored and patterned, interspersed with bland spots or blotches, snags, tears, missing threads and erratic and even chaotic designs. Where is the mind located? Cayce did not believe the mind was in any one single part of the body. We must now disperse what we formerly thought of as mind being located in the brain, and think of it rather as an electrical impulse being sent from the brain to each and every cell of the body. It is now possible to understand these statements. Each as an entity is a miniature copy of the universe, possessing a physical body, a mental body, and a spiritual body. These bodies are so closely associated and related that the vibrations of one affect the other two. The mental especially partakes of the other two, in the physical, as the conscious mind, and in the spiritual, as the superconscious mind. Every cell of the body is a universe in itself, with all the elements necessary for the creating of, the bringing into being of that necessary. Let the spirit of truth permeate the mind as it works with those applications that may be made. Thus it creates and makes for a mental attitude which enables every cell of the body itself, that is being enlivened by those influences from the activity of the electric forces created, to be more in accord with creative or God forces manifesting in a material body. What happens to the conscious mind forces and physical forces at death? The conscious mind forces either are in the soul's development, and in the superconsciousness, or left with that portion of material forces which goes to the reclaiming, or remolding, of physical bodies, for indwelling of spiritual entities. Cayce feels that what one thinks, what he puts his mind to work upon, to live with, to feed upon, to abide with, that his soul body becomes. If he dwells on moral, ethical spiritual things, he will become spiritual-minded, thereby narrowing the chasm between him and his future life. There are no real shortcuts to developing one's mind. There really is not even a short, easy prayer that one can say. All Cayce wants is that a person simply appreciate the mind, its power and its source. Healing is the channeling of energy, and that energy is the fruit of the mind well used and disciplined. All creativity arises from a proper utilization of the mind. Let such an approach come from rather those who seek. For unless they seek to be a channel of service, how much channel can you make them? Either a ditch or a trough or a rut, but these are not growing or creative things. All matter moved and changed, assuming its design according to its own vibration and maintaining its activity by the law of attraction and repulsion, the positive and the negative. Everything that came into being was an aspect of mind, the spirit of the Creator. What the mind does and how it operates, and even its origin, are all the results of calculated design. We find there are no coincidence, or chance coincidence. Each and every individual follows out that line of development of the entity in the present earth plane, as it has received from the preceding conditions. And each grain of thought or condition is a consequence of other conditions created by self. The thoughts and teachings of Cayce on the mind spell but one direction, that of responsibility. We have received a great gift, one that makes us co-creators with God, and a gift that will enable us to restore the life and well-being of those we love, not to mention our own being. If thoughts are deeds, our constructive and positive thinking will aid in building or establishing that which will bring peace, harmony, joy, love and the other fruits of the Spirit. Mind is the builder, therefore thought precedes action, and the sum total of our life on this planet can be computed by thought forms imaged within the mind. Then it is important for us to keep proper check on the gateways of the mind, the five senses. For what we really want is that whatever is fed from these sources, five senses, into the mind is consonant with our ideals and our goals as a channel of the divine energy. What kind of patterns do we want emanating from our minds? What are we creating? What kind of world at the thought level are we building? Are we working on patterns of decency and love, or mutual respect, or compassion for the weak? Are we creating patterns of hate and fear, of prejudice and jealousy? We must apply the spiritual to our mind, our thoughts, words and deeds. We must take our mind and apply it to the total pattern in the realm of the unconscious. It is a fact that a life experience is a manifestation of divinity. And the mind of an entity is the builder. Then as the entity of total self sets itself to do, or to accomplish, that which is of a creative influence or force, it comes under the interpretation of the law between karma and grace. No longer is the entity then under the law of cause and effect, or karma, but rather in grace it may go on to the higher calling as set in him. We have to be careful how we treat the mind. For mind force varies with individuals, yet it has a common need or care. What a soul feeds upon, dwells upon, becomes its means of development, or retardation, for good and evil are expressed according to motives and the use of motives. What we do with our mind affects others, and therein lies a great responsibility. In the physical plane, do the thoughts of another person affect a person either mentally or physically? Depending upon the development of the individual to whom the thought may be directed. The possibilities of the developing of thought transference is first being shown, evolution, you see. The individuals of this plane will and are developing this as the senses were and are developed. As shown here, the physical 137 would not know of this, but could he know of it if he went to sleep? That is, his subconsciousness, and my subconsciousness meet as a vibration force meets a radio machine and causes a sound when the machine is tuned in. This is the illustration, see. Both must be in that attunement and separated from the physical forces to become conscious, for these are of the spiritual elements. We use our mind to reach others, through our language, our culture, our writings. It is important to understand that we connect with those we try to help through a proper use of our mind and our thoughts. What connection must be established with those we are trying to help? As of old, he that would be aided must seek, even as has been indicated. As has been given, let all things be done in order. Seeking, knowing, as ye measure, as ye act in thought, in mind, in heart, in body, and the imaginations of thine self become materialized in others' actions. Thoughts are things. Thoughts have an impact, they are not sterile and fruitless. Conditions, thoughts, activities of men in every clime are things, as thoughts are things. They make their impressions upon the skein of time and space. Thus, as they make for their activity, they become as records that may be read by those in accord or attuned to such a condition. This may be illustrated in the wavelength of the radio, or of such an activity. They, the activities, etc., go upon the waves of light, upon that of space. And those instruments that are attuned to say may hear, may experience, that which is being transmitted. Remember, the mind is the builder. They take hold, but if these are lost in him and his promises, not only the physical disturbance of the neurosis may be eliminated, but the influences of unhappy experiences may become as nothing. Mind is the predominant contact point for the self-healer. This is where his growth begins. The mind constantly seeks expression in and becoming attached to the material. Mind forces are divided into three phases of thought processes. The conscious mind, which gives direction to the building up, use and control of matter. The subconscious or unconscious, which is the storehouse of memory, the interbetween, and the superconscious, which is devoted entirely to the soul mind. These are not three distinct minds. They are rather to be seen as the functions of the one mind, three different levels. Between the conscious and superconscious, there appears to be constant war, or working at cross purposes. Yet in the end, the superconscious must be the victor. Man's mind is beautiful, and yet it does not operate in a vacuum. It cannot. It needs nature and the environment, so that the five senses can feed it and nourish it. For the beauty of man's mind is oft directed by the beauty of his environs.